Normandy, France, June 7, 1944. The morning after D-Day was grey, humid, and filled with the mechanical growl of engines echoing across the hedgerows. As the sun pushed through the mist, German forward observers scanning the coastline near Carrington saw something that defied all logic. Endless convoys of American vehicles rolling from the beaches, their silhouettes stretching beyond the horizon. Among them, one shape appeared again and again, a squat, square-bodied machine with open sides and an unmistakable stance, the Jeep. It wasn't a tank or an artillery piece, yet it seemed to multiply every hour. By dawn, American engineers were unloading hundreds from landing craft, each one fueled, armed, and ready to move inland. Wehrmacht officers tracking these columns noted, with disbelief, that there appeared to be no shortage. Not of parts, not of fuel, not of men. Where the Germans relied on the scarce Kübelwagen, assembled by hand and rationed by the High Command, the Americans had fleets of jeeps arriving faster than German units could destroy them. By mid-morning, General Lieutenant Wilhelm Falle, whose 91st Air Landing Division had already suffered catastrophic losses, reported in his final message before being killed near Picoville. Their strength is not soldiers, it is industry. Across occupied France, German signals intelligence relayed the same observation, that the enemy's machines seemed infinite. For the Americans, the Jeep was more than transport. It was a symbol of reach. Mechanics swapped engines in minutes, medics converted them into ambulances, and commanders used them as mobile command posts. Each Jeep represented a link in a system Germany could not match, warfare by industrial management. And while Allied troops moved with purpose, German morale began to fracture. The belief that precision and discipline could outmatch American material abundance was vanishing. Because on that second day in Normandy, German officers weren't just seeing an army, they were witnessing an assembly line invade Europe. Before we continue deeper into what they wrote in their diaries, and the chilling moment some realized the war was already lost, make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next reveals how a simple four-wheeled machine broke the Wehrmacht's spirit more effectively than any weapon ever could. 2 days after the first wave, the fields of Normandy no longer echoed with just rifle fire and artillery. They pulsed with the rhythmic rumble of tires. German patrols hiding in the hedgerows watched as jeeps darted across muddy lanes, splashing through craters, their drivers laughing despite the chaos. To the Wehrmacht's seasoned veterans, this carefree movement amid destruction looked almost surreal, a reflection of how different the American war machine truly was. Captured reports later revealed how German units tried to sabotage Allied supply lines, only to realize it was futile. Every bridge they destroyed, engineers rebuilt. Every jeep they disabled, another 2 arrived from the beaches. It wasn't bravery that unnerved the Germans, it was consistency. American logistics seemed to erase mistakes before they mattered. Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Möller of the 352nd Infantry Division described it in his diary. They repair faster than we can destroy. Even our air attacks cannot halt them. For every jeep burned, 2 appear the next morning, like insects spawning from the earth. Those words, recorded near St. Lo, carried more fear than any Allied propaganda leaflet. By this stage, over 12,000 American vehicles had landed since D-Day, each part interchangeable with the next. German mechanics, used to hand-fitted Kübelwagen parts, were stunned by the American principle of standardization, where a broken axle in one Jeep could be replaced by any other part from 100 miles away. The concept was alien to German doctrine, which prized craftsmanship over scalability. Behind the scenes, the U.S. Army's Quartermaster Corps and Seabees worked tirelessly, unloading more vehicles from Liberty ships every hour. From the beaches of Omaha to the roads of Isigny, convoys moved like arteries feeding a vast organism. German prisoners later said it felt as if the enemy had mobilized its factories rather than its soldiers. This realization cut deep. For the first time, officers understood that even tactical victories were meaningless against a nation capable of replacing its losses faster than the enemy could count them. The Jeep wasn't just transport. It was a message. America could afford war indefinitely. And as Allied units pushed inland towards St. Lo, that message became inescapable. The rain fell hard that morning, turning the fields into a mire of mud and shattered wheat. From a farmhouse window, Feldwebel Ernst Rau of the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division watched American convoys snake through the countryside. Despite the downpour, the jeeps kept coming. Headlights dimmed, engines humming, chains clattering against slick roads. Rau's report to battalion command that evening was brief, but haunting. They drive as if roads obey them. By mid-June, the German front near Coutances was unraveling under the sheer mobility of the U.S. forces. Where Wehrmacht columns slogged for hours to reposition, American officers simply ordered new vehicles forward. Jeeps became scouts, medevacs, artillery spotters, and command hubs, their adaptability staggering even to Allied observers. German troops, relying on horse-drawn wagons for ammunition in some sectors, could barely comprehend the tempo of American movement. Captured radio intercepts from the 716th Infantry Division recorded frustrated officers arguing about what they were witnessing. "Everywhere there are these small cars. Destroy one, and 10 more appear. What kind of army has so many?" In reality, the answer lay far across the Atlantic. Ford's massive River Rouge plant in Michigan and Willys' assembly lines in Toledo were producing one Jeep every 90 seconds, a number that stunned German intelligence analysts when they learned of it weeks later. The same industrial precision that built American cars had been redirected into building mobility for war. For U.S. soldiers, the Jeep was more than machinery. It became an extension of identity, a symbol of independence and resilience. Infantrymen painted names on the hoods, carried wounded comrades in the back, and raced through enemy fire with reckless confidence. Every Jeep on the road was proof of something deeper, a nation capable of turning imagination into overwhelming momentum. As German officers watched endless convoys glide past wrecked Kübelwagens, the psychological impact deepened. The Allies were fighting a different kind of war, one measured not by courage but by capacity. And in those soaked French fields, the conclusion began to spread in whispered tones through German command posts. Perhaps the war wasn't unwinnable because of strategy, but because the Americans had mechanized inevitability itself. The sky over Isigny-sur-Mer was thick with exhaust and drifting smoke. It was June 15th, 1944, 9 days after the Allied landings, and the American advance showed no sign of fatigue. German reconnaissance aircraft flying over the Norman countryside that morning sent back startling images, lines of jeeps extending for miles, glinting in the morning haze, weaving between columns of Shermans and half-tracks. To the analysts at 7th Army headquarters in Le Mans, the photographs were more terrifying than any bombing raid. In one intercepted message from June 15th, Oberst Rudolf Stegmann wrote to his staff, "We face not men, but machinery, not battalions, but production lines." His words captured the growing despair among German command circles, even as elite units like the Panzer Lehr Division prepared counterattacks. The sight of American convoys replacing their losses overnight broke the illusion of parity. On June 16th, German field intelligence noted that new American units were arriving faster than destroyed ones could be reported. Captured documents later confirmed that by that date, over 150,000 vehicles, from jeeps to trucks, had landed in Normandy. The Willys MB, barely weighing a ton, had become the lifeblood of the invasion. Everywhere, the same pattern unfolded. On June 17th, near the Wehr River, a German patrol ambushed an Allied convoy, destroying several jeeps with Panzerfaust fire. By dawn on June 18th, replacements were already rolling through the same road. Identical models, same markings, same driver's humor intact. Wehrmacht soldiers, accustomed to shortages and repair delays, were bewildered. How could an enemy replace losses overnight? That question haunted commanders. Engineers in the field called it Krieg durch Fabriken, warfare by factories. They realized that for every German machine assembled by hand, dozens of American counterparts were stamped, bolted, and shipped with mathematical precision. By June 19th, the psychological strain had begun to surface in reports to Berlin. Officers complained not about enemy tactics, but about morale, a silent acknowledgement that the battle's outcome was no longer in doubt. The battlefield of Normandy had become more than a fight for territory. It was proof that American industry could bend time itself, making destruction irrelevant, replacement instantaneous, and resistance meaningless. By June 20th, the German defensive line near Caumont-Levante was collapsing into chaos. Panzer units, slowed by fuel shortages and broken supply chains, struggled to reposition. Across the hedgerows, the low whine of American engines echoed again. Thousands of jeeps darting across muddy tracks, connecting artillery batteries, medics, and command posts in perfect coordination. What unnerved the Germans most wasn't the sound of fire. It was the sound of motion. Reports from the 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division on June 21st described a battlefield in which small cars swarm like insects. For every wrecked jeep, 2 more appeared, sometimes within hours. German soldiers began referring to them grimly as die unendlichen Wagen, the endless vehicles. Captured diaries later revealed the psychological toll this created. Lieutenant Dieter Hasse wrote on June 22nd, "We fight the same road every day. We destroy what we can, and yet, the next morning, it is rebuilt. Their will is mechanical, unstoppable." For men trained to see warfare as a contest of skill and courage, this was incomprehensible. Meanwhile, American field reports from June 23rd celebrated the very same phenomenon. Jeep convoys carried rations, ammunition, and replacement parts seamlessly. Mechanics rebuilt engines in hours. Soldiers joked that if one jeep broke down, another would roll off the ocean. Behind them, in England, depots held entire reserve fleets waiting for shipment. The irony was cruel for the Germans. Their Kübelwagens, handcrafted and limited, became liabilities. Spare parts were scarce, and engines often failed under constant movement. By June 24th, Wehrmacht maintenance logs showed breakdown rates nearing 60%. Officers who once mocked the rugged American design began noting its genius. Simplicity meant immortality. On June 25th, reconnaissance teams near Caumont reported that American columns moved without pause, day and night. For the first time, even veteran panzer officers began using the phrase "Der Krieg ist verloren," the war is lost. That same night, as artillery lit the hills, one German captain whispered to his adjutant, "They have built an army that never stops." The truth was dawning painfully clear. Germany's soldiers were still fighting a war of valor, but America had built a war of momentum. The morning fog over Bayeux was thick enough to mute the thunder of artillery, but not the sound of progress. On June 26th, the 2nd Armored Division advanced steadily toward the interior, flanked on both sides by convoys of jeeps, carving their way through ruined villages. To local civilians, the sight was mesmerizing. Columns of dust, canvas tops flapping in the wind, and hundreds of engines purring in rhythm like an unstoppable mechanical heartbeat. German intelligence units observing from the hills recorded the scene in disbelief. By June 27th, intercepted Allied transmissions revealed that jeeps were being used to transport more than supplies. They were carrying maps, officers, engineers, and even portable radios, linking every corner of the front. One German colonel described it bitterly. "Their coordination is perfect. We command by message. They command by motion." This mobility changed everything. Where German orders often took hours to reach field units, American commanders adjusted strategies in real time. A destroyed bridge on June 28th near Bayeux delayed German reinforcements for 12 hours. In contrast, U.S. engineers, arriving in jeeps with portable tools, rebuilt a functional crossing in 3. To the German defenders watching from the woods, it felt like the enemy had mastered time itself. Captured Wehrmacht reports from June 29th spoke of unbroken convoys that seemed immune to fatigue. The psychological damage was spreading rapidly. Officers once proud of German mechanization were now questioning its entire philosophy. The notion of designing perfect machines suddenly seemed irrelevant when confronted by American abundance. Good enough, cheap enough, and endless. By June 30th, the contrast was undeniable. American logistics created a kind of immortality on the battlefield, a cycle where destruction was instantly undone. German tank crews, stranded without parts or fuel, watched in silence as Allied convoys rolled past their wrecked armor. For them, the battlefield had become a moving factory floor. One SS officer wrote in his diary that night, "We are fighting an industry disguised as an army." And as July approached, even the most hardened German commanders began to understand. Normandy wasn't a clash of tactics. It was the collision of two civilizations, one built by craftsmanship, the other by conveyor belts. The first days of July brought little relief for the German command near St. Lo. The front was in flux, not collapsing outright, but unraveling under a pressure that no artillery could explain. By July 2nd, German officers realized the enemy's greatest weapon wasn't firepower or numbers. It was rhythm, the steady, uninterrupted rhythm of engines. As dawn broke, Lieutenant Friedrich Weiss of the 302nd Infantry Division wrote in his logbook, "They are tireless. I hear the same sound day and night, the grinding of their little machines. It's like listening to the end of Europe." He wasn't exaggerating. Convoys of jeeps continued to flood the countryside, moving ammunition to front lines and ferrying wounded men to field hospitals with surgical precision. American after-action reports from July 3rd show that a single logistical corridor near St. Lo moved over 1,000 tons of supplies in less than 24 hours, mostly carried by fleets of jeeps. For every combat platoon, there were mechanics, engineers, and drivers ensuring that nothing stopped moving. The Germans, running on dwindling fuel, could only watch their enemy's momentum multiply. On July 4th, as American troops raised small flags over temporary camps, German radio intercepts captured a message that would later become infamous. "Der Krieg ist über. Sie können nicht gestoppt werden." The war is over. They cannot be stopped. The message was traced to a senior logistics officer in the 17th SS Division, sent moments before his position was overrun. By July 5th, entire German sectors had begun falling apart from logistical starvation. Tanks were immobilized, trucks abandoned, and even command cars sat without petrol. Yet the Americans, with their jeeps carrying fuel cans strapped to their sides, seemed immune to the same fate. A captured soldier summed up the despair best. "Our machines die of exhaustion. Theirs never stop multiplying." Each passing day revealed the true power behind the jeep, not its engine, but its idea. Mobility without limits, replacement without delay. And by July 6th, the sight of another endless column of jeeps snaking through the bocage didn't just mark a tactical defeat. It symbolized the collapse of a nation's belief that craftsmanship could win a war against machinery. By July 8th, the once disciplined Wehrmacht formations west of Coutances had begun to fragment under pressures their doctrine had never prepared for. The cause was not defeat in battle, but paralysis by contrast. German officers who had been trained to rely on efficiency, order, and precision found themselves confronting an enemy that replaced destruction with duplication. Major Ernst Volker, commanding a reconnaissance company of the 275th Infantry Division, recorded his disbelief. "We blow up one bridge, and within hours they cross another. We destroy 20 of their vehicles, and 30 more arrive before dusk. It's as if their industry fights beside them." American records confirmed that in the first 10 days of July, over 2,500 replacement vehicles, mostly jeeps, had been offloaded from Liberty ships at Omaha and Utah supply sectors. The process was mechanical perfection: roll off, refuel, reassign. There was no ceremony, no recovery teams sent to salvage damaged machines. Vehicles came and went as if they were cartridges in a rifle. For German officers used to calculating the lifespan of each vehicle in months, this expendability was unfathomable. Field workshops of the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division reported that mechanics were forced to cannibalize wrecks for bolts and bearings, while American units replaced entire transmissions in open fields under artillery fire. By July 9th, The growing realization spread through command channels. The Americans' industrial logistics had created a new kind of warfare, one that rendered destruction meaningless. German artillery could obliterate a convoy, but within a day, replacements restored the column. The very concept of attrition no longer applied. In a private diary entry dated July 10th, Captain Hans Dietrich wrote, "We do not fight men anymore, but production lines that move on wheels." That sentence would later appear in post-war military studies as the moment German psychological resistance began to collapse. Midway through July, some Wehrmacht officers stopped writing casualty reports altogether. They believed the figures were irrelevant when their opponents' losses regenerated faster than they could count them. By July 11th, the phrase Jeepkrieg, the war of jeeps, circulated among the ranks. It wasn't a joke. It was resignation, the admission that the endless American engines weren't just transporting soldiers, but carrying with them the death notice of German military doctrine itself. By July 15th, the German front west of Saint-Lô was bleeding from invisible wounds. No decisive battle had been lost, yet the outcome felt inevitable. What broke the Wehrmacht wasn't the thunder of artillery, but the quiet, mechanical persistence of American motion. From dawn until dusk, the sound of engines filled the Norman valleys, not tanks or bombers, but the shrill whine of thousands of 1-4-ton reconnaissance trucks weaving through the hedgerows. German forward observers described them as metal insects, impossible to eradicate. Lieutenant Karl Brenner of the 3rd Parachute Division noted, "You destroy one, and before the smoke clears, 2 more arrive. Their movement has no end." Captured reports from Turin U.S. Corps reveal that a single logistics column could replace every destroyed Jeep in its division within 36 hours. Each replacement carried spare engines, crates of fuel, rations, and communications sets, transforming simple vehicles into self-sustaining extensions of an industrial ecosystem. By July 16th, the German 84th Corps found its telegraph lines overrun by Jeep-mounted reconnaissance patrols darting through side roads the Wehrmacht didn't even know existed. Communications disintegrated, and entire regiments were left blind. Oberst Franz Lingen, in his post-war memoirs, confessed, "We realized too late that every Jeep carried not just men, but America's factories inside it." The phrase echoed through Allied intelligence debriefs, a poetic summary of Germany's unraveling logic. For the first time, German officers began referring to their own motor pools as relics. The Kübelwagens, once symbols of German engineering, sat abandoned with cracked fuel lines and worn clutches. Mechanics stripped them for scrap to repair the few remaining trucks. Meanwhile, American Jeeps, lightweight, standardized, endlessly replaceable, continued to multiply like a living organism. By July 18th, the illusion of parity was gone. German field headquarters along the Saint-Lô-Perrier line sent desperate requests for reinforcements that never arrived. In intercepted communications, one commander was heard muttering, "This war is no longer fought with soldiers. It is fought with factories." When dusk fell over the hedgerows on July 19th, the constant hum of engines carried across the fields, a lullaby of defeat. The Wehrmacht had not yet surrendered, but the silence inside their command tent said everything. They already knew they'd lost. When the war finally ended in 1945, the Jeep was never retired, because it was never just a vehicle. It was the physical manifestation of an idea, that mobility could be mass-produced and that freedom itself could be engineered. In post-war Europe, the same roads once scorched by tank treads were now filled with surplus Jeeps delivering mail, medicine, and hope. In Italy, farmers used them as tractors. In France, resistance veterans used them to rebuild villages. In Japan, occupying forces patrolled the shattered ruins of Tokyo in the same machines that had once charged across Iwo Jima. The Jeep had outlived the war that created it. Its influence rippled through every military doctrine that followed. The British Land Rover, the Soviet Gaz-69, and even the modern Humvee all carried traces of that 1941 blueprint: simplicity, endurance, and adaptability. It redefined how armies thought about movement, not as a logistical afterthought, but as the beating heart of strategy. German engineers, studying captured units in 1946, quietly admitted something that would never appear in official reports. It wasn't that we lacked genius, one former Mercedes designer wrote. It's that they built a machine that anyone could fix, anywhere. That single truth reshaped military design for generations. Even decades later, veterans could still hear that unforgettable sound. The distinctive sputter of the Go Devil engine, bouncing over mud and gravel. Many swore it was the sound of reassurance, the mechanical heartbeat of home following them into battle. And yet perhaps the Jeep's most enduring victory wasn't in combat, but in memory. It became an icon, not of dominance, but of reliability, unity, and ingenuity. The little vehicle that rolled off an Ohio assembly line ended up symbolizing the industrial soul of America, a nation that could turn steel into salvation. As historians look back, they don't see a marvel of technology. They see a promise kept, that no matter how far from home the fight went, the hum of a Jeep meant help was coming. Because in every field it crossed, every life it saved, and every road it rebuilt, the Jeep didn't just move soldiers, it moved history.